All right, everybody. Hey, sorry, there were some connection issues with the stream at first, so I had to reestablish this stream. Hopefully it doesn't throw you off too bad and you're able to find me. But yeah, here I am. So we're going to start in about 2 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Sorry, there was a little bit of a issue. When is the final, Leo? Wow, just coming right out. You can see it on the syllabus. It's right there printed. Let me tell you exactly the time and date. The final exam is Tuesday, May 18th, a week from today, 9 a.m. to 10:50 a.m. Okay? It's printed on the syllabus. That's the official time and date. May 18th, 9 a.m. to 10:50 a.m. Good morning, everybody. Good to see all you guys. So we got another couple seconds, and then we'll get started. No problem. Thanks, Leo. What's up, Leo? Are your other professors holding finals at odd times? I wonder. Good to see everyone. Good morning. Morning. All right, good to see all you guys. Welcome. Naomi, Alessandra, Jose, Stephanie, Alexis, Naaman. Lakers in the play-in. It's such a shame. I don't even know about the play-in system. What is that all about? Anyway, yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts about it. It's kind of exciting, I guess, for the league. You don't see people tanking at the end. At the same time, though, yeah, two might overlap if you use up all the time. Which two might overlap, Leo? Not mine, because my final is being held at the official time designated by the registrar for Cal State Fullerton, so it's not an improvised time. Do you have another professor whose final overlaps with mine, or are you talking about a totally different set of two finals? Curious about that. Anyway, guys, welcome one and all. So now it's 10. We're going to get started. As you guys know, first of all, thanks for working on your essays and submitting those to me. I've been receiving your emails. Okay, good. That's good to know. Yeah, I hate it when they do that, though. They really shouldn't be messing with the times and going for their own slots, because that does completely interfere with the student's ability to plan and prepare for their final week. Yeah, so I'm sorry to hear that. But anyway, we're Tuesday morning, 9 to 10:50 next week. Okay, so yeah, thanks for turning in your papers. I had a class that I just taught from 8:30 to 9:45 right before this. So if you have sent me your paper in the last hour and a half, not to worry. I'm going to send you back your confirmation right after this class period ends, because I couldn't be on email while I was teaching the last 75 minutes. But anyway, thanks for all the papers that you guys are turning in. I'm going to be grading those throughout the week, and I'll make sure to finish them before the end of the weekend. And then when they are done, no later than the end of the weekend, I'll notify you through Titanium, and you can check with me for your grade on that, or overall as we head into the final exam. Now, I distributed the final exam study guide last week, sometime Thursday or Friday, so you've all got it. Make sure to pull that study guide up right now. If you don't have it pulled up, then pull it up right away, and we're going to use that to guide us through this review session and the second review session that happens on Thursday. So this last week of live stream is just all about review sessions. There's no more new material. We're just going back through all of the notes, through the questions in the study guide, and trying to get a sense of the best type of answers. So as we did with the midterm review sessions, if you remember, I like it to be a little bit more like student-driven. So I appreciate it when the students are the ones that provide most all of the information and content, but I'll intervene as needed to clarify things, to correct things. If I think that an answer or some information is getting off track, I'll steer us back to the right information. But other than that, it's going to be mostly student-led. Anyway, with the study guide that you've got, you'll see that there's a list of 81 total questions there. And up until question 43, they were all topics from the first half of the semester. After that, 44 through 81 are from after the midterm. I'm going to ask a set of questions off of the study guide list, just as we saw with the midterm. With the midterm, I think you had to answer 7 out of 11. and you had 75 minutes to take the test. The final gives you a window of 110 minutes, so there's 35 additional minutes to work. So instead of 7 out of 11, I'll probably have you do like 8 out of 11 or 12, and that'll be the way that it appears on the day of the exam. But nobody knows exactly which ones I'll select. I can only say that I will select a few more from the second half than from the first half, and you will have the ability to choose from the question bank that I select. You'll be able to self-eliminate maybe 3 or 4 of those questions because I'll ask you to do 8 of 11 or 8 of 12. And there will be emphasis on the second half study guide questions, but there will still be some from before the midterm too. So having said all that, I now turn it over to you to just give me some numbered questions that you want us to talk about. And then after you ask any question, your other classmates and I will try to assist in giving you the right information to give the response. So whenever you're ready then, don't hold back. Just let me know which question or questions we can talk about, and we'll go in whatever order that you want. So you've seen, hey there, Jason, you see the study guide. Direct me to which questions that we want to cover, and as soon as you do, let's get it going. So use your study guide to direct the review session and let me know. You know which questions you want more help on. You know the ones that maybe are a little more confusing to you. When is the final? It is Tuesday, May 18th, 9 a.m. to 10:50 a.m. So it is a week from right now, next week, Tuesday, 9 to 10:50. Okay, Janice, 47. What does it mean for one proposition to entail another? Okay, good. Somebody tell us, what does it mean when a proposition entails another one? What is the concept of entailment? For one proposition to entail another, what does this mean? This was discussed in our meetings on the Gettier problem, and Gettier's essay is Justified True Belief Knowledge. It was one element of the closure principle that he discussed, where he says, okay, so Kobe, if A entails B, then if A is true, this means that B must also be true. Okay, good. Mark, you say because A is true, B has to be true. It's not so much that A is true, it's just that if it was, then it would have to be the case that B is also. So like A implies B, meaning that if A is true, it's an if. If A is true, then in that case, B would have to be also. So let's ask to follow up. Can anybody write down a pair of sentences where A entails B, where the first one entails the second one? Now, Brandon, what you're writing is the closure principle, which is not exactly the same thing as what this question is about. The closure principle has entailment as one element of it, as you can see there, where it says, if a subject S is justified in believing a proposition P and P entails Q and S deduces Q from P, then S is also justified in believing Q. That's the closure principle, which contains entailment as a component of the definition. But question 47 is only about entailment by itself, not the closure principle overall. Okay, so Kobe, you say Dr. Vulich was born in the 80s. You were born in 2001, and therefore this entails that Vulich is older than me. Yes, so let me see. What's the first proposition? I guess it's a conjunction. Vulich was born in the 80s. I was born in 2001. And second proposition is Vulich is older than me. Yeah, so the first proposition does entail the second one, so that's good. If the cat is in the hat, then the hat is carrying the cat. Okay, let me think about this. So, by the way, though, when you're writing two sentences, don't write an if-then. Like have sentence number 1, period. Sentence number 2 after that, period. Like they're separated. So Celine, what it should say is cat is in the hat. That's one sentence. Second sentence, hat is carrying the cat. But again, Celine, sorry, we have people with leaf blowers out here, but I'm going to talk over that. The hat carrying the cat, I mean, if the cat is in the hat, I guess you're saying that the hat contains the cat. Like it's just the same thing said differently. Carrying sort of sounds like a verb, like the hat moves or something. But anyway, fair enough. Kobe, I noticed that you just used like the same exact example. Sorry for the cleaners, whatever. I noticed you used just the same exact example that I provided in class discussion before. You think you can give a different one at all? If you can't, that's fine. But yeah, entailment. If A entails B, then the truth of A guarantees the truth of B. That was in your notes. I know, Kobe, but I'm saying, can you freestyle a different one based on the knowledge of the concept that you can apply creatively to different examples, right? So can you do that? I don't know. I own a BMW, therefore I own a German automaker vehicle, you know, because every car by BMW is made by a German auto manufacturer. So if I own a BMW, then it entails that I own something that was produced or manufactured by a German company. Let's say Biden signed a bill into law. This entails that the Justice Department will enforce this bill because, you know, if it's been signed into law, then it has the full force of law. So it entails the second thing. Mark, I had a croissant this morning, and therefore you had breakfast this morning. Okay, good, right? Because if you had a croissant, it entails that you had breakfast. Notice the other way around, though, doesn't necessarily follow. Having breakfast doesn't entail a croissant because a breakfast can have all kinds of different options. But having had a croissant, it counts as a breakfast item. So there you go. Brandon, if I walk into the 99-cent store to purchase a candy bar, the candy bar will be 99 cents. Well, again, though, you're not writing two sentences. You're writing an if-then, which is one long conditional. But I could convert it, I guess, into a proper example. Like A could be, I bought a candy bar at the 99-cent store, and B would be the candy bar is 99 cents because having bought it at that store entails that that's its price. Okay, good. So thank you, guys. That's fair. Let's continue. Give me another question then. So that's 47. It's about entailment. Entailment happens when the truth of one statement guarantees the truth of another. And you wrote it the proper way up there, Kobe, the definition anyway. If A entails B, then whenever A is true, B would have to be true as well. Okay. The man was killed, therefore the man is dead. Yeah, so if he's been killed, then he is dead. As a philosopher, you always try to think of a counterexample to anything a student raises, but I can't really think of one there. I guess the only possible counterexample was he was killed, he flatlined, then a defibrillator resuscitated him, and so he actually lived even though he was technically killed for a minute. But I know what you mean when you say killed, like killed for real. So anyway, let me go then into the next question. Hi, Maybelline. Leo, you're asking about number 80. Explain the concept of bad faith. Okay, so very quickly at the end of the last lecture, we talked a bit about the work of Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher of the 20th century. And what he says is that according to existentialism, which is his view, existence precedes essence. And that means that a human being doesn't have any kind of defined identity when they first exist. They're just a blank slate. But then over time, the core defining features of them, which is their essence, come into shape. And we're not talking about physical features. We're talking about characteristics like what they believe in, what they support, what they don't support, what they like, what they don't like, and all of that. So he says the essence that you have is created by your own what? Can anybody tell me that? Where did Sartre say that the essence you have comes from? Because this is relevant to the question that you're asking, Leo, about number 80. So existence precedes essence. Essence is like the necessary defining features of something. Where does this essence come from, since he says it is not there to begin with, because existence comes before it? So where does the essence come from according to Sartre? Why are you like this? Like, why are you like the way you are, according to Sartre? Why are you a conservative or a liberal or, you know, a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or an atheist? Why are you like that? What has made you be that way? They do develop it over time, right? Yes, but where does it come from? We develop them over time? Can you be a little more precise about the developmental process of the essence? How does it develop again, in specific? You're kind of close. I just want you to expand on the point. Okay, very good. Yes, Brandon, we choose to be the way we are. You create your own, exactly. With your free will, you just make your own choices to be the kind of person that you are. So Sartre would say the reason that your essence is the way that it is because of you. It's not because of your genetics. It's not because of your parents or your community or the time that you grew up in. It is just because you have free will and you've chosen to be this way. So what's bad faith? Bad faith is any time where a person tries to place the responsibility for their essence on external factors that they could not control. So bad faith would be like saying, yeah, I'm a really angry person, but you know what? It's because of my dad. The way that my dad acted, he led me to be that way. So it's his fault, not mine. That would be bad faith, just one example, of a person trying to shift the burden of responsibility for their own essence to something other than them. I gave you the case of a person's parents saying, like, talk to my parents about the way I am. Another case could be, look at the community I grew up in. I grew up in this very rural, conservative, traditional community, and so I grew up with those values, and that's what shaped me. But again, the existentialist would say that's bad faith for you to say that it's your community. It's because you chose to be the way that identified with that community. Other people in the same community will say, I hate this community, and I don't want to be a part of it, and I don't identify with it. So free will all the way down, free will to the very last detail. Everything's based on freedom and free will. It's not that your essence is given to you and that you have no choice in the matter. So bad faith is the one thing that existentialists say you shouldn't engage in. And again, it is just any situation in which you try to divert personal responsibility for your essence onto external factors you don't have control over. So it's not your environment, it's not your genetics, your parents, your culture, or time period, or generation, or anything else. You're like that because of you, and if you say otherwise, it's bad faith. So that's number 80. To the next question, 69, Naaman, all right. Who knows what is a nomological dangler? This was discussed by J.J.C. Smart in his paper, Sensations and Brain Processes. So let me know, what is a nomological dangler? It's a word discussed by him in the essay. It's got a pretty straightforward meaning, even though it sounds like a big complicated word or term. What is it? Nomological dangler. Sort of, Leo, but a little too much. It's something that has not yet been explained by science. It doesn't mean that it cannot possibly be, but it would be something that is not currently understood according to physical science. That's right. So essentially, yes, but with a slight little edit. Something that has not as of yet been explained according to physical science. And we'll get to that, Celine, yes, but let me focus on this for the moment. Now, why did he bring this up? J.J.C. Smart brought it up because he says that dualists, people that think that there's a separate mind that's not just a physical brain, like, a soul or whatever, dualists that hold that view think that consciousness is not physical. They think that consciousness is something that can exist even without the functioning brain, like in the afterlife or whatever. So if that was true, if dualism was true, then J.J.C. Smart says that consciousness would be a nomological dangler, because if it's not physical and it's not based on the brain and the physical behavior of the brain, then it's a mystery. Then it's something that's like spiritual or something that's supernatural. And if that's the case, it's unobservable and it's not susceptible to scientific or physical explanation. And J.J.C. Smart, he is a physicalist. So he says these nomological danglers, these are like the boogeyman of science. Scientists don't want to say that there are weird things out there that no one knows how they work, or that operate according to laws that we can't possibly comprehend or study. So he wants to dismiss the idea that consciousness is a nomological dangler, and instead he stands on the position that it is a brain process, and all of your sensations and conscious mental states are just physical processes of the brain. Okay, so that's like the full scope of what he was talking about. He says, I'm interested in consciousness. I think it's just a brain process, so I just think it's physical. Some people think that it's something spiritual or supernatural, like dualists. According to those folks, it's a nomological, which is something dangling outside of our law-like understanding of physics and science. And if that's the case, then it's something that scientists don't like. But never mind, don't worry, because there's no need to be a dualist, since he thinks that the more reasonable arguments are on the side of physicalism. Okay, so basically something unexplained by science, and consciousness, he says, is not that, but some people, dualists, would argue it is. Okay, to the next, you've asked Celine about 77. What's Plato's analogy between the soul and the state? Okay, so in Plato's Republic, a classic work of antiquity, thousands of years ago, ancient Greece, Plato described what he thought would be the ideal human society, and he calls it the Republic. And in his book, The Republic, he compares the ideal society with the ideal human life, like your best life you could live. He thinks that there's some basic similarities between the structure of the Republic and the structure of the human soul. So let's hear you tell me what those similarities are. First of all, there were 3 parts to the Republic. What were the 3 parts? If you could say what the 3 parts are, or even what they're supposed to be doing or whatever, that would be a good starting point, and we'll go from there. So the analogy between the soul and the state, you have to talk about Plato's analysis of both parts. So what's the state like according to Plato? And then that'll build a bridge to what he thinks the soul is like. So we have merchants, warriors, and kings. Very good. Yes, Kobe. Merchants, warriors, and kings. That's the three divisions of the republic. Now, what are they each supposed to be doing? Those are three words. Explain them. What is each one of those compartments of society there to do? So because you'd have to say all this stuff. If this question was chosen, you have to fully expose all the information, leaving no details behind. So what is a merchant? What is a warrior or a king? No, the information's out there. The whole, I mean, a lot of just life and school is just like presenting info. It's out there and you just have to present it to me. So there have been writings on this and you just have to report on them. Merchants, they produce goods and services to gain profit. Correct. Brandon, a little too fast. You're talking about the virtue that the merchants would have. Yes, and the virtue of the warriors is courage. The virtue of the merchants is temperance. We're going to get to that, and it's fair to say it now. But the first thing I was asking is just what their job is overall. And merchants are those that are like producing goods, and they're selling and trading them for profit. Just, you know, goods and services. They make stuff and sell it. What do the warriors do, though? What's the job of warriors? They fight to defend the republic, correct? They're like the military or police. And the kings, what is their function in the republic? The kings are there, you know, they're very important to the republic because their role is to do what? They're not the fighters, they're not the merchants that are making, you know, widgets for you to buy, but the kings are there for what reason? Yeah, so they are people who preside over the republic. They set the laws, the policies, and they control the warriors. So they are like the, you know, the leadership politically and otherwise of the state. They run the show. They occupy the positions of power. So this would be like the equivalent of like heads of state or congressional bodies or whatever. Okay, so then we have warriors that fight, merchants that make goods and sell them, and kings that rule and create laws, etc. According to Plato, when each of these different parts of the republic is working at its highest level, they'll be working with a virtue that is unique to each one. And now, Brandon, we can speak about those virtues. So the virtue of the merchant class is what? It's called temperance. Maybe someone will tell me what temperance means. What does temperance, the word, mean? Because this is what he thinks the warriors ought to have as a virtue. Virtue is a quality that lets something do its job at a high level. So what is the virtue that would make merchants good merchants? He says it's temperance, but what does temperance mean again? So just the definition of each virtue. Temperance means that you're able to what? Yeah, moderation and self-control over your appetites and your desires so that you don't become too greedy, that you don't let the things that you want cause you to make rash or foolish or short-sighted decisions. Okay, so you got to have a degree of moderation and self-control. If you're going to sell things and produce goods and make profit, then if you're not temperate, you'll try to produce the worst quality goods at the highest price to make the most money, and that's going to tend towards the disadvantage of the republic as a whole system. So they should have the ability to make money through their purchase of, through the sale of goods, but not in such a way that they don't have that moderation. Now, warriors are supposed to have courage. What's the virtue of courage all about? Warriors that fight, that defend, that protect. If they have this virtue of courage, this means that they have what quality? Can we say what courage is in just a few words, maybe? I know it's something that you're like, what? Courage is courage. Come on, everyone knows what it is. But I'm sorry, we can't read minds. We have to have proof that you know. So it's willingness to face danger, right? When it's right and appropriate to do that. So warriors are going to be good warriors if they're able to rush into a dangerous situation and face that threat, you know, like when there's a shooting happening or something, the cops can't be like, you know what, it's a little too sketchy in there. I'm going to just wait until this is over. They're supposed to defuse the situation. So they ought to be brave. In other words, willing to face danger at the right time for the right reasons. Now, with the kings, they're supposed to have a different virtue, which is important. And the king's virtue is what? Simply enough, it's called virtue of kings in the Republic. Anybody know? Yeah, it's wisdom. It is wisdom. That's right. So wisdom is just the ability to make careful decisions based on a proper analysis of all the facts and make good long-range plans. So kings that run everything, you'd be having a very poor republic if they were not intelligent and if they made foolish decisions that were based on incorrect information. So anyway, what's a good republic? It's a republic where you have people divided into these three categories according to their aptitude. and each one of them is showing their virtue. We've got merchants showing temperance, warriors showing courage, and kings showing wisdom. They should also all cooperate and function harmoniously, so we shouldn't see any threats to overturn the rule of the kings by the merchants or by the warriors. So if they all properly submit to the right rule of these kings, they act according to their virtue, they do their own job, and don't overstep their bounds to do the job of other parts, then that's a good, well-functioning republic. Now, he says that that's similar in a sense to the structure of the human soul. So I've got now to ask about that. An analogy compares two sides. So we've talked about the whole side of the republic. Now we're going to build up the other side of the human soul to show how there's a similarity. So 3 parts of the human soul, and what were those? According to Plato's work, he thought that within each of us, there's a 3-way division of parts, and it matches somewhat the description of the republic and its divisions. So what is it when it comes to a human soul? We've got blank, 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 3 parts. What are those? Appetitive, spirited, and rational. Correct. Now, the appetitive part, the spirited, and the rational part, what is each one all about? The appetitive part of you is the part of you that has appetites and desires for things that you want to fulfill. Okay, so anything that you think, I want that, and I really want to get it, I don't have it yet, that's the appetitive part of you that's talking right there. So when you're thinking about how much you want some possession, or how much you want some experience, or how much you want a certain type of relationship, or how much you want a certain type of achievement, like graduating college, those are appetites, and the appetites drive you towards their fulfillment. The appetite part of you, the appetitive part of you, is parallel, he says, to the merchants, because the theme is that both want to gain stuff. The merchants want to profit and acquire wealth and income through the sale of goods, and the appetitive part of you also wants to acquire just whatever it is that you desire. Okay, so the appetitive part is the part of desire. The spirited part of you is kind of like the noble fighter with a lot of pride and passion. So that's the part of you that wants to compete, that hates to be disrespected, that wants to be honored, and it's got a lot of passion and pride, kind of like a warrior. So the spirited part of you is like the warrior within. And then the rational part of you is like the king within, that really ought to be running everything. It's the part of you that's intelligent, wise, that makes careful decisions, and that's not overly influenced by emotion nor by just desire, but it does the right thing based on long-range rational analysis. So in the same way as the republic would be functioning well if each part had its virtue, so will your soul function well if each part has its virtue. So your appetitive part should be moderated by temperance, your spirited part should be enabled by courage, and your rational part should be guided by wisdom. And if your rational part is allowed to lead your life and preside over the lower parts of your soul, and each one does their job according to their virtue cooperatively, then your life will go well. So that is what he thought was the analogy between the soul and the state. 3 parts of the soul, 3 parts of the state, 3 virtues that are the same in each. And importantly, king is supposed to rule the thing, and it's not supposed to be challenged by these other parts. When you do bad things, it's because your appetites are out of control, or your desires have become too powerful, contrary to your better judgment. Okay, so there's some stuff about the republic. Let's go ahead then and get to another one. What's the next question you want to talk about? You see the list, so let me know. '65. Okay, let's look at that. Supervenience physicalism. Okay, so yeah. Daniel Stoljar wrote about supervenience, and this concept is needed to really fully explain and understand the concept of physicalism. Okay, so to understand supervenience, you kind of have to present the example of a dot matrix picture. Tell me, anybody, can you, what is a dot matrix picture, and how does this example go? So the concept of supervenience starts with an example of a dot matrix image, or a pixelated image, if you like, and then it applies some of the intuitions from this to physical reality by saying that the universe is somehow similar to a dot matrix picture. But let me know, let's start piece by piece. What's a dot matrix picture? It's a big picture made out of a bunch of tiny dots, correct? Okay, so like even right now what you're looking at is a kind of dot matrix image. Like if you were to just see the screen that's showing my face to you, I mean, it's a video playback, but say that you took a screenshot of just one image of this meeting. Well, the image that you have saved has a certain set of coordinates that are assigned to each pixel on the resolution of your viewing device. And by mapping the coloration of that pixel to each position on the grid, the image is thus generated. So a dot matrix picture is like a physical copy of a grid space where there are ink dots imprinted upon it. Now, correct therefore. I mean, basically, long story short, a dot matrix image is just a big picture made out of a bunch of tiny little component bits that are either dots or pixels. Now, what's a global feature? Tell me that. What's the terminology of global feature applied to a dot matrix or composite image? What's a global feature then? Just the definition of that. So a dot matrix picture is like a big picture made out of dots, and a global feature of a dot matrix is what? You say it is a smaller aspect of the bigger picture. I would rather say it is a big picture aspect of the composite, you know. So your definition's a little odd to me, but I guess it sort of makes sense to you. Name it, a big picture aspect of the composite. Right, so I don't know. An example, I guess, can help. Remember this thing where I tried to draw like a day at the beach, sun shining out, whatever. Some birds and stuff. Okay, a little smaller, not as easy to see, but anyway, waves, sun, a couple birds here flying above. Now, if this was a dot matrix image, let's suppose, what would be one of its global features? Now we can use a clear example. So what is a big picture aspect of this composite, like one of the features in it that is a creation of a lot of dots put together? So like a global feature is just something that is the result of putting a bunch of the little dots together in a certain order. Okay, so you could say that the, well, you say a mountain. Jerry, sorry to say, I mean, I was trying to make it clear this is water, these are waves, but yeah, if you want to say it's a mountain, then you could say the mountain was one of the global features. Angel Mountain also, I mean, come on. Anyway, yeah, or the sun, or the birds, right? So it's just something formed out of the little dots. Okay, fair. Now, if you had two dot matrices, which had the same exact arrangement of dots, like dot for dot duplicate, then would the second dot matrix have all the same global features of the first? Yes, I mean, I'm just going to help you out. Yes, of course. If you have two dot matrix pictures, the second one is a total replica of the first. So wherever there's a dot and an ordered position on the first one, there's the same kind of assigned order in the second. That would ensure that all the same global features are seen in the second image, because all the global features are in the first place is the pattern shown by the dots. So two dot matrices with the same dot pattern have the same global features. Okay, now the physical universe is then compared to these dot matrix examples. In the physical universe, there could be the claim that there's also a base of little things that everything supervenes on. Instead of them being dots of ink or pixels, though, what would be the corollary to physical space in this reality that we are in? Me, you, and all the things around us, according to physics, are built out of little particles, which some refer to by the word what? What are the dots in reality? Because we're not made out of pixels and not made out of ink, but we are made out of atoms, we could argue. So take the universe as an analogy to this dot matrix picture. The only difference is that in the reality, we have global features, but they're made out of atoms instead of ink dots or pixels. Now, if there was a second universe that had the same exact arrangement of atoms, then according to the analysis, it would have all the same global features. And that means that it would have every single feature identical. So not only would there be the same historical events and facts, but there would even be the same psychological events, meaning that your mental life and the thoughts of your counterpart, you know, your doppelganger in the second universe, they would be all the same. And that's supposed to indicate that your thoughts and mental life are themselves just the playing out of the physical distribution of atoms in space. Okay, so this is supposed to show that everything's physical, even your consciousness, because if we had a physical copy of our universe with the atomic arrangement held fixed, then even your consciousness would be the same in that other universe. So it's supposed to show that consciousness is not independent of the constitution in terms of its physical atomic composition. So even your mind, thoughts, feelings, hopes, fears, pains, pleasures are not anything supernatural. They're just the outcome of a bunch of atoms being bundled together in a certain way. So much so that if we could imagine a second universe with the same atomic facts, it would have to include all the same psychological facts too. Okay, so supervenience. It's all about like a big picture that's made out of a bunch of little dots, and then you compare that to the universe, which is like a big structure made out of a bunch of little atoms. And the analogy is supposed to show that just as with the two-dot matrices, which are identically arranged with the same global features, if there were a hypothetical second universe with the same atomic facts as ours, then just like a copy of this, it would have the same global features as our universe. So there would still be President Biden, and there would still be, you know, the assassination of JFK and all the other things that have happened here, because those are just physical events that occur due to the arrangement of the particles in space. Okay, so let's go on. I see a question about 54, Jerry. So why did Ted Sider talked about this a little bit? The concept that if space-time theory is true, then nothing ever, like, quote-unquote, changes. Can anybody tell me what they think is the right explanation for that? Why is it that if the space-time theory was true, then there's no such real thing as change in this universe? Why would we say no change? Nothing's changed. I'll give you a moment to think about it or write something out. If you don't have much, then I'll try to add some more questions or thoughts. But why is it that if Einstein's space-time theory were true, that we would have to give up on the idea that anything ever really changes? While you're thinking, and hopefully typing, I'll talk about some example that maybe helps. And this is an example that I think was discussed before. So suppose that, like, you can see I have like a little facial hair going on right now, but I could easily shave it off, and then on Thursday I would show up to the same live stream and I would have a different facial look. And you could say, well, he's changed. You know, he had a beard, now he doesn't. But on the space-time theory, there hasn't really been change. And why not? Let me see now, name it. Because there are temporal parts existing at all moments of time. Yes. And Leo, because everything is happening, has happened, and will happen based on the theory. Correct also. So anyway, like, instead of saying that I have changed because I've, you know, had longer hair and then shorter hair or something, we would just say that there's two different temporal parts of the same object. One of them, dated Tuesday, the 11th, has this facial hair. Another temporal part in the time sequence, dated Thursday, has the clean-shaven look. But the two temporal parts that are assigned their positions on the timeline have never moved. They've always been there occupying those positions. And so you really have to give up on this robust idea of like something undergoing change as it passes through time. There is no unfolding of time. There's all the events that are fully displayed out in the whole space-time fabric. And so what you think of as change gets redescribed as different attributes of different temporal parts of the same object. Like looking back at your own past, if you see a photo of yourself as like a 5-year-old and look at yourself in the mirror now, you probably say, I've changed a lot. I've put on weight and I've become taller. You know, I'm a much different looking person physically now. And on the space-time theory, though, that little child stage of you is still in this universe. And stages of you that are like relative to your present consciousness ahead of you, they're already in this universe now. So there's no possibility for anything to change because everything's already there. Instead of saying something pops into being, like a new moment with a new feature, we say that moment has always been there with the feature that you witness. And instead of saying change, we just say that like different stages of the individual that have always existed have different attributes. Okay, and so Kobe, how you put it, because everything happens in all moments, change is defined as two different temporal parts that have different features. Yes, correct. I don't know if this helps, but I'll just add one last analogy because this is one that I've seen, and I think Ted Sider talks about it too. Suppose there was a road, like this is a road. Sorry for these markers, as we're getting late in the semester, and
they're not functioning as well as they used to. Some of them I need to buy a new pack. But anyway, suppose this is like a road, and you got a guy driving along the road in his car, and what he notices as he goes is that, like, in this part of the road, there's a lot of potholes and cracks, and so it's like a bumpy, rough road, you see? Then as he gets further along on the highway, he notices that it's all clear and smooth and well paved. And so this driver who's driving along the path, he might say, the road has changed. It was bumpy, and then it's smooth later. But in a way, if, let's say, the whole highway has always had all these features the whole time, then the highway isn't so much changing. It's just that the subject is experiencing different parts of it at different times, you see? So like one part of it has these potholes, another part of it is clear, but those two parts of the whole highway have always had these features assigned to those positions. So as a sort of analogy or metaphor, if space-time theory is correct, you are like the whole highway, and your consciousness is kind of like the driver that just goes through the different points of it, noticing different attributes along the way and thinking of it as change. But in fact, the whole highway all exists, always will exist, including all of its stages and parts. Okay, whether that helps or confuses you more, I hope it helps because it makes sense. Anyway, though, let's see, what's the next question? 79 from Alessandro, let me go ahead and look at that. So what is existentialism? We talked a little bit about it briefly a moment ago when we talked about that faith. So I think in terms of existentialism, one thing you got to say is like the core slogan or motto that that kind of defines the whole concept. So something precedes something else. You've said this earlier in the chat, but let's say it again. According to existentialism, fundamentally, blank comes before what? Let's just go over that point again. Yes, existence precedes essence. Okay, tell me what it means that existence precedes essence, because when you do that, you're explaining existentialism. So just explain that sentence in more detail. I'm a child. You say existence precedes essence, and I'm like, huh? I have no idea what any of those words mean. Please, Mr. or Mrs. Adult, tell me. Let me know. Enlighten me. What does existence precedes essence say or mean? It means something. Maybe it's hard to put a fine point on it, but try your best. Say something about what you think the deeper meaning of that three-word sentence is. I mean, if somebody just wrote existence precedes essence as their answer, and if I had that as a question, it's not like it would get no credit, but it would be not as good or as thorough as a more detailed answer that explains the point of this. Okay, so essence of a thing is the necessary defining attributes it needs to have. And humans are not born with an essence, but rather develop them over time. You exist before you become who you are by your own free will. Exactly. Okay, good. So according to existentialism, when you are born, you're not patterned out already. You're not born as a liberal, conservative. You're not born as like a Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist. You're not born as like a, I don't know, a fan of rap music, rock music, classical music. You know, tastes in anything, preferences, belief systems, values, they're not there yet on the first day. This is just a blank slate, but then it fills in over time. And what fills in the essence that makes you that type of person you are, with the cluster of defining features that I just sort of gestured towards. What fills that in is your own free choices that you make throughout life. And by creating your essence, he says, you create a paradigm for all humanity also, because the way you're living stands as your belief as to how people ought to live. So look, you're going to college, right? That means that if people go to college, you think that's a good choice because it's the same choice you're making. So when you do something for yourself, you kind of like approve of it for anyone in principle. That means that when you create your own essence, you're also kind of creating like how you think people ought to live in general. And so your best life is reflected in the pattern of decisions that you make that have created that essence of yours. So, I mean, that's really kind of the big picture of existentialism. It starts off the simple claim that existence precedes essence, but there's a lot of detail behind that. If existence precedes essence, then our essential characteristic features that make us have the identity that we have are things that are not there immediately. According to the view of Sartre, they're provided over time through free choices that you make, and therefore you're the ultimate author of your own essence. Any attempt to say otherwise would be bad faith, so you have to own it and take the responsibility for it, because as much as you're free, you have to be responsible too for the things that you do with the freedom, including create your own essence. So don't blame it on other things. That would be bad faith. Okay, so looking up at Celine, you have asked about 59, the grandfather paradox. So that takes us back to the writing of David Lewis, who discussed the paradoxes of time travel. And the grandfather paradox was kind of like the capstone example at the end of his paper, where he discusses the funny case of a person who wants to go back in time to kill their own grandfather back in 1921. So tell me about the scenario of Tim. What's Tim want to do in this hypothetical example? It's very science fictional, okay? But you guys, I'm sure like film. I always find it funny. People study philosophy and they're like, come on, none of this is real. But then you go watch like the Avengers and you love it. So hypothetical scenarios really shouldn't be that strange to anybody. But anyway, Tim hates his grandpa and he wants to kill him. Correct. Problem though, grandpa's already dead. So what's he going to have to do? Just follow up through the story. We go through the narrative. So Tim doesn't like his grandfather, or he hates the record of his life, because obviously he's no longer alive. So he wants to go back in time. He wants to go back to kill this grandfather. Now, he wants to take the grandfather out way back in 1921 when the grandfather was still in his youth and in his prime. But if he does succeed, well, you can tell me next. What's supposed to be the issue here? The problem, the paradox, is whether he can kill his grandfather or not. Can he actually accomplish the goal? Tell me why some say that it doesn't seem possible for him to do that. So we're going to go through both sides. Like, to those that say no way, he could never do it, he could never actually achieve it, because if he did, then he would no longer exist. And because if he did, then it's like he would have never had been born, because if his grandfather dies at that earlier time, then he never got the chance to conceive one of Tim's parents. And so it would essentially annul his own existence, which is a contradiction, because obviously he exists if he's taken a time machine into the past. So it would seem to be just a contradiction to the timeline of history for this man to both die and therefore never have grandchildren, but also to have a grandchild that's coming to kill him. So so that seems to be an incomprehensible, impossible outcome, because it would be logically contradictory. On the other hand, though, regarding the same case, Lewis says that some people have the feeling that why couldn't he? If he's back in the past and he's got a gun and he's pointing it at somebody and he has a full motive to kill, why shouldn't he be able to do it? So the paradox is basically stated as, it looks like he both can and can't, and therefore this is a contradiction, so time travel must be impossible. Well, how does Lewis resolve the so-called paradox? He says, logically speaking, he will not be able to succeed. So he's bound to fail in the end. But he'll probably just fail for an everyday reason, like the gun will jam, or he'll miss, or it'll be a case of mistaken identity, or some object like a bird will fly in between, like that famous baseball play where the bird got hit by the pitch. Anyway, something will happen that'll just prevent this outcome from occurring, because we already know that Tim ends up getting born. So we kind of know how the story will end in terms of grandpa's life. But Lewis says that the reason that sometimes it seems like he can is because the word can itself is kind of ambiguous in scope. Sometimes we use the word can with a broad sense, and sometimes we use it with a narrow sense. So the word can in the broad sense refers to what you can do, what you're able to do, relative to a very broad description of facts. What the word can means in the narrow sense is what you can do given a more restrictive set of facts. Kobe, the author, says that he will not be able to do it, that he'll be bound to fail, but because of like an ordinary reason, not because like the gun disappears or something, but just because, he's going to witness the failure inevitably of his attempt that was always happening at that point in 1921. So he won't be able to succeed because of the logical contradictions discussed. But now it's going into the whole point about the word can. So there's a narrow and a broad sense of that word. Maybe I talked to you guys about this by asking you the question, can you speak Russian? Your first answer would probably be no. But if I ask the question a little differently, like compared to a dog, can you speak Russian? Now you're like, oh yeah, because I mean, I haven't learned it yet, but I guess in theory I could if I really, really studied, but a dog could not even learn it in theory. So in the first way of answering, no, I can't, you're focusing on the narrow definition of can. Like, given the fact that I haven't studied it yet, this narrow range of facts means I cannot. But in the big picture, like given the fact that I'm a human after all, who's able to acquire a new language if I really wanted to focus on it, in that sense, I can. So in the big picture, I can speak Russian. In the little picture, I can't because I haven't done it yet. And so he says that's sort of in play here with Mr. Tim as well. When you look at the big picture in the timeline of world history and the fact that Tim was born, we would say he can't. So in the broad sense of can, he cannot. In the narrow sense of can, just given the fact that he's there with a gun pointed and stuff, it seems like he can when you just omit reference to the fact that he's from the future and that he was born later in time. So the dominant response of him is he can't because of the broad interpretation of can, but he says that when people feel like he could, they're looking at the word can from a narrow sense. And now Kobe and others, here's how that kind of, I think, is trippy and interesting for us, not time travelers, but just real people. If the space-time theory is correct, then you also can't do anything except for what you actually do. So like here you are at this meeting, and if the space-time theory is correct, guess what? In the broad sense of the word can, there's no way you could have possibly avoided this because it's a part of your timeline and the whole thing already exists. So this was always going to happen. On the other hand, though, just looking at the word can from a narrow sense, like you might not have wanted to come today, or you might have overslept, or you might have had a change of heart about needing to come to this meeting. That's what makes you think that you can. So we're kind of like Tim too. We are locked into the timeline of events that's bound to happen according to space-time theory. And when we think we have the freedom to do otherwise, we're using can in a narrow sense of the word, but not in the big picture sense of it. All right? Now, Kobe, you say here, what about the yes part? Because earlier you said people were trying to give basis that he actually could do it. And have I explained that? I hope so. The yes part is evinced by people that are thinking of the word can in a more narrowly defined sense. Like if you just look at the fact that he's there pointing a gun, it looks like he can. But if you take a big picture look at the whole series of events, it seems inevitable that he cannot. And he sides with that big picture description. He thinks the intuition of the yes answer comes from looking at the word can too narrowly. Okay? So yeah, that's all about the grandfather paradox from question 59. Name, and you're asking about 55, soon he'll be in the past, also from Lewis's article. Okay, so, and Janice, you're asking about 6, so we can go over that too. Let me first deal with this question on soon he'll be in the past. Oh, you mean 64. Okay, that's no problem. Yeah, we'll look at 64. That's the one about Descartes establishing that you have a body. Okay, so soon he'll be in the past. It sounds like it's a contradiction. So this is another one of the assumed paradoxes of time travel that Lewis is trying to eliminate in his essay. Because remember, his big goal in the paper is that time travel actually is possible. And so to all the paradoxes that people claim, he thinks they don't really show that it is impossible. One of the paradoxes he has to grapple with is the claim that if time travel happened, people could say things like, soon I'll be in the past. Or they could say like, hey, in 10 minutes, I'm going to be in the year 2030. You know, because it's like they're thinking, well, I have 10 minutes that I'm going to spend getting into this machine and stepping out of it. But when I step out, it's not going to just be 10 minutes passing for everybody else. It's going to be like I'm a decade into the future. So how does that make sense to say that like in a short amount of time, I'll be 20 years ahead? Well, he says the way to make sense of this is to introduce 2 different types of time. Can anybody remember what those were? Lewis says we can distinguish between blank time and this other type of blank time. So can you fill in those blanks? What are the 2 types of time that the author utilizes or introduces here? Personal and external, correct. So tell me what the definition of both. What's the definition of personal time and the definition of external time too? What are those? Because this is the really core of the answer for that question. So personal time, what is that? Yes, one is personal time and one is external. But let me get that definition real quick about personal time. What is it? Yes, okay, Kobe. So personal time is time as it would be experienced or measured by the individual time traveler like as shown on their personal wristwatch. Correct. So personal time is the time experienced by the time traveler themselves as they go through the sequence of events. What is external time? What is external time? Personal time is just the time that's experienced, measured by the individual time traveler. External time is the time that would be experienced and measured by who? External time, the other one. Some have noted the concepts, so I would assume you have those notes. External time is the time that everyone else experiences, right? So time as experienced and measured by all the external observers and clocks. Correct. So now we can make sense of these weird sounding expressions. If a person says that, so here, let me give you a science fiction type example, all right? Suppose that Elon Musk or something drops, the first time machines this summer, and he wants people to try out these machines. So you say, fine, I'll do it. You get in this machine and you're going to go ahead up to 2030. You want to see if there's still a pandemic. Has coronavirus been annihilated by that time? Or are we still dealing with it? Are there crazy variants? What happened in the future? So you're going to check it out. So it's 2021, you get in the machine, and now you're into 2031 or let's say 2031. So as you're heading into the machine, they tell you it takes about 10 minutes for the process of the machine to function. So you're getting in and you tell your friends, all right, guys, this is crazy, but in about 10 minutes from now, I'm going to be in 2031. So in 10 minutes, I'm going to be 10 years into the future. It sounds like a paradox because it sounds like, how can you be 10 years ahead in 10 minutes? This is two different units of time. But now we actually have the ability to coherently explain this. What's the right definition of what he's saying? That in 10 minutes of what kind of time, he'll be 10 years ahead in what other kind of time? So parse this for me one time based on the definitions that are given here in the chat. To say that in 10 minutes I'll be 10 years ahead in time would be specifically to say that in 10 minutes of what kind of time? So to our time traveler heading to the future, who will spend 10 minutes in the machine and then emerge 10 years into the future later from that machine, we have to say that the 10 minutes are 10 minutes of what kind of time? In personal time, right? So in 10 minutes of personal time, he will be 10 years ahead externally. Right. When he steps out of the machine, it's not like everyone else is 10 minutes ahead and they're like, what? You're not in the future. This is just 10 minutes after you got in. If he steps out and it's 2031, so it's like a decade ahead in time, but for him it was just 10 minutes, that's what time travel is. It's a discrepancy between the time experienced by the time traveler and the clocks on the walls and everyone else's experience. If he went into the past and he said, yeah, in 10 minutes I'm going to watch the Beatles play live in 1966, sounds like he's saying in 10 minutes ahead of time, I'll be minus 55 years in time. So again, we would say in 10 minutes of my personal experience time, I will be 55 years into the past in external time. So paradox explained away. By introducing the two different types of time, we no longer have any paradox because the discrepancy between the individual's experience and the external world is to be justified by reference to the two types of time. And Einstein's theory of space-time and relativity actually implies that this is not just a hypothetical, but it's a real fact, that we all do occupy our own personal time. The thing is, they just all pretty much agree because we are not able to expose ourselves to the type of velocities and forces that would make personal time dilate from the external time experienced by other people. So for the most part, we have a happy coincidence that our personal and external time is the same. But if we were able to travel at high speeds that are close to the speed of light, then time would move so much slower for the individual going at that speed that we would have to assign different measurements of personal and external time. Okay, so we've got that one now. And you've asked about 64, so let's take a quick look at it. So Descartes, in his sixth meditation, he finally comes to the conclusion that you do have a body. And this is something that initially he was willing to doubt, because in the method of doubt, you say, I will assume to be false anything and everything that could possibly be doubted. So if there is even like a very small chance that something could be false, the method of doubt would say, go ahead and pretend that it is, and keep doing this until you find something that is not capable of doubt. Well, at the end of his book, where we got to the sixth meditation, he says, okay, well, I think I could prove that God exists. And there's a series of steps that gets him to that. Basically, it's like, you have a mind. You have a mind that's thinking thoughts. One of the thoughts is the thought of God, but that thought is infinite and the idea of an infinite being. So it must come from something infinite. Therefore, there is a God. Once he thinks he's proven there's God, he says, well, that opens up a lot of doors, because if God exists, we know he's perfectly good, and that means he's not a deceiver. So if he's not a deceiver, then I can be assured that when I have clear and distinct perceptions, they must be true. And that's how he gets to his conclusion of dualism. But another point that he makes after that is that now that he thinks clear and distinct perceptions are guaranteed to be true, he can add to his knowledge that he does have a body, because he thinks that's pretty clear and distinct. Now, there were a couple of reasons that were mentioned by the author of why it is clear and distinct that you have a body. Do you remember some of those points? Why is it so obvious that you have a body, that it's your body and not anybody else's? Yeah, tell me if you can. 3 main reasons given why it's clear and distinct that you do have a body, according to Descartes. So it's clear and distinct because, let's see, what do you think? So you'll see this in notes for Descartes' 6th meditation, philosophy of mind. Well, I think therefore I am applies, but we've already kind of talked about the application it has. I think therefore I am is how you know you have a mind. Even though the method of doubt is there, you know you have a mind. Since you know you have a mind, you know you have an idea of God. It has to be caused by something infinite, so God exists. He's perfectly good. And the whole point there is just to get you to the conclusion that there's a perfectly good God, so your clear and distinct perceptions are true. But now the question is, why is it clear and distinct that you do have a body? Okay, well, one of the points, let me help you out, is that you can control your body with your mind. Okay, so you can control your own body with your thoughts. Like if I say, hey, left hand, snap your fingers, it just happens, right? I just make it happen because I think, and I control the hand. But notice this, I can't control anybody else's body with my mental thoughts. So I can't like look at someone and be like, he's going to snap his fingers, and then it just happens. Because I only have the locus of physical control over this body with my mind. So one reason to think I have a body is obviously because I can control this one by doing stuff thinking, I can make it do stuff just by thinking. But I can't do that for any other body, so it seems like this one is mine. Another reason to think that I have a body is that sensations arise for me when a stimuli is given to this body but not to another one. So basically, like say if a flame was placed under my hand here, I would feel pain. But if a flame was placed under your hand and I'm just sitting back watching, I'm not going to be like, oh God, that hurts, stop, because it doesn't hurt me. It's affecting your body. So another reason to think that this body is mine is because this is the one where if stimulation is given to it, I feel the sensation of it, whether it's pain, pleasure, hot, cold, or anything else, tickling, So I experience sensations when this body is given a stimuli, but not others. And a third thing is this. Apart from the ultimate event of death, which of course Descartes does think will cause God to separate your soul from your body, during the time that you are alive, you cannot remove yourself from this physical body, right? So I know people talk about astral projection and all that stuff, but for real though, you can't like depart from your body and then just go float around while it stays behind. For any other body though, in the whole universe, I can certainly get away from it, socially distance myself from other people, but I can't distance from me. So 3 reasons that it seems pretty clear you do have a body. Number 1, you can control it with your mind. Number 2, you experience sensations when stimuli is given to it. And then there's number 3, that you can't just get away from it, unlike all the other bodies. So these are 3 decent reasons to say it's clear that you actually have a body and it's not just a dream or an illusion. So in the end of his meditations, he's like, never mind all the stuff I said before about how everything could be a dream. Now I say God exists, and if he's good and perfectly righteous and just, then clear and distinct things must be true. And yeah, it is pretty clear and distinct that you have a body for the mentioned given reasons. Okay, so we can move to the next if you have another question. There's still, let's say, what is it, a little over 10 minutes of time for us today, so we do have enough time for at least one more, maybe 2, if you want. I'll just wait for you to give me guidance on the next one. What do you think? You are now confused about 63. Well, why? If anything, you should be less confused. The reason that 63 is true, okay, so 63 says, how does he establish that the external world exists? He says, again, starting with the whole point that in the sixth meditation, he thinks he's proven the existence of God, God who's perfectly benevolent, and therefore assures that clear and distinct perceptions are true. So why is it obvious then and clear and distinct that the external world exists? That's another point that's mentioned. So why is it clear? He says there's 3 reasons, or at least, that this is clear and distinct. So what makes it so clear and obvious that there's an external world, apart from the fact that you have a body, which is a different point? Why is it clear and distinct that there's an external world? You cannot control what you blah, blah, blah. Tell me. There's some points that were raised. You cannot perceive only that which is blah, blah, blah. You're going to say those things. So tell me reasons why it's so clear that there is a whole external world and it's not a big dream. Yeah, you can't control what you perceive. That's one point. Yes. Also, you cannot perceive only things that are in your favor. And memories are not as vivid as current perception is. And so those are 3 points. You'd have to, let's say, engage in a little bit of discussion of the points. Yeah. So here, let me go through each one. If the world was a dream, that means that it's not objective. That means it's subjective. That means that it's something that you're just dreaming as you go along. And with dreams, you'd think that if you're the dreamer of the dream, you'd have some kind of authority and control over the things that are happening in the dream. So if this world was just a subjective but not an objective place, then why couldn't you just manifest things that are in your favor by thinking them? So if this world was my dream, I'll tell you what I would have happen today. I would have some wealthy person call me on the phone and be like, yo, I'm giving out millions of dollars to random citizens, and I saw you on YouTube and I thought you were doing a good job for these kids, so how about it, $1 million today? Or actually rather 50 million, is that better? Here, let me give it to you. And I'll be like, amazing, yes, thank you, I'm never gonna work again, even though I love doing it. So, you know, the point I'm making is that if I was somehow a dreamer of this world, good stuff would just keep happening. I would never get injured, I would never have any kind of loss or disappointment, and everything would play in my favor. But the fact that that's not what happens shows that this external world is not my dream, it's subjective, and sometimes things happen in it that I don't like, but there's nothing I can do about it because it's real. And another thing is this, I cannot control what I perceive, regardless of whether it's favorable or not. I can't just make myself see things that are not really there. So like right now on this table, I want you to see a bird just standing right there, like a pigeon or something. But you can't. What you can do is like think in your head of like a bird that you're imagining, but you can't like manifest one right here like you're seeing it in actual space. And so what that shows again is that the external world seems to have its own independent objective reality, because if it was just something you could create, then it seems like you'd be able to make things pop in and pop out of it just through your thoughts if it was just a mental space, right? And a third thing is this, memories, they're not as sharp as a perception that you're having in the present is. Right now, this is happening live. So this meeting that we're in the middle of, you're having a very sharp and clear perception of it because it's, you know, happening in the moment. In a couple years or something, if you look back at this without watching the video, of course, and you're just thinking in your mind of the memory, I guarantee you your memory won't be quite as clear as this is. Just like right now, thinking of your memory of first meeting me on, I don't know, the first week of classes, those memories are a little faded and less clear and distinct than this is now. Now, what explains the drop-off in clarity from the original moment you perceive something to the moment later when you're trying to think back on it? He says the only thing that could explain that is if the external world is real, because that means that when you have the first perception, it's generated by the object that you're in the presence of. And when you have the memory later, the reason that it's a faded copy is because it's no longer been generated by the original external object that you perceived. Instead, it's just a recollection of that through the mental image of a mind's eye. If the world was a dream, though, and there was no external reality, there would be no basis for this difference, because the original perception and the memory later would both be just mental happenings, not connected to an external source of reality. So we can only explain the degradation from the original perception on the basis that the original perception was perceiving things that are real, and the mental recollection of it later is trying to revive the original perception of something that was real. But it's not as clear because you're not around the real thing anymore. Okay. So those are reasons why it seems clear and distinct that there's an external world, and there's a separate set of reasons just mentioned prior to that, why he also thinks it's clear and distinct that you have a body. One other thing I guess I can add, let me say this one more point. And not to worry, but yeah, keeping those clear will be good for you. Last thing I'll say about the thing of how you know there's an external reality, it's not a dream. Towards the end, he says that if it was a dream, there would be no continuity to it, because dreams are episodic. They don't hang together in one long narrative like episodes in a Netflix series, right? When you have one dream, it's not like stay tuned for the next installment next week or tomorrow night. They just don't continue on in the same line. So waking experiences, though, do. Like today at this meeting, you know that you're studying for a final because like a couple weeks ago you were studying for the midterm, and before that you were first taking the class. And you know, you have a whole continuous narrative of events that are linked together with your waking life. But your dreams are just random things that happen one night, a different thing happens another night. So he says that's another good reason to think it is clear and distinct, that the life and reality you're living is not a mental thing that's a dream, but an actual objective existence in an external reality. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. While I'm just talking about that, it makes me think back to the words. Very briefly, because I know we want to move on, but on the dream thing, it's kind of interesting. I might not have emphasized as much before. He says on page 560, right at the end of his book, he says, I should not have any further fears about the falsity of what my senses tell me every day. On the contrary, the exaggerated doubts of the last few days should be dismissed as laughable. This applies especially to the principal reason for doubt, namely my inability to distinguish between being asleep and being awake, because I now notice that there is a vast difference between the two, in that dreams are never linked by memory with all the other actions of life, as waking experiences are. If while I'm awake, anyone were suddenly to appear to me and then disappear as happens in sleep so that I could not see where they came from or where they went, it would not be unreasonable for me to judge that he was a ghost or a vision created in my brain. But when I distinctly see where things come from and where and when they came to me, and when I can connect my perceptions of them with the whole rest of my life, then I am quite certain that when I encounter these things, I'm not asleep but awake. And I should not have even the slightest doubt of their reality. Because from the fact that God is not a deceiver, it follows that in cases like these, I'm completely free from error. Okay, so just a little more from the book to reinforce that. So with a 5-minute span of time here, I think it would be maybe maximum one question. Or, you know, if you don't want to cram it in, then we can also just wait until Thursday. But yeah, let me know. I'm just following along with what you feel is best. So you see the list. Let me know if there's another one you want to hit on quickly. Otherwise, we can resume on Thursday and just continue from there. About 4 minutes of time. Let me say this, I guess, while you're thinking on your own. Okay, so wait, 45. No problem. Let me take a quick look. Classical account of knowledge. Okay, who knows the 3 terms that define knowledge according to the Greeks? Blank, blank, blank. And what are those things? The Greeks, classical account of knowledge. Some of you guys reported on this, I think, probably on your paper. But they did say something about what knowledge was, and they thought it was a combination of 3 criteria. Justified true belief, yes. So if you were going to say what the definition of knowledge is from Greek philosophy, you would give a definition of each point of knowledge. So what is truth? Truth is when what the proposition says matches the facts, the reality. Give an example. What is a belief? Belief is when a subject thinks that a proposition is true. And so you can give an example like that, like say that there's 2 jurors. One person thinks the defendant is guilty and the other person doesn't think so. So they don't agree on the statement that the Jones is the killer. One person believes yes, the other person believes no. So beliefs are what you think is true, but of course there's only one fact. The guy cannot both do it and not do it. And then justification is when you have good reasons or evidence to support your belief. So if you're that juror and you say, look, I believe he's guilty because did you see the evidence? I mean, they showed us video where the guy like literally stabs him in the back and it's like his face is clearly shown, and that murder weapon has his fingerprints. So, I mean, it's very much justified for me to think that he's the killer. Anyway, I'm just giving a hypothetical, but it's something that I hope you can relate to, because when we make judgments about evidence, sometimes it's in a court of law, but it's not limited to that context, of course, as human beings pursuing knowledge in every different area of life. So justified true belief. Now, they're supposed to be each needed, but only sufficient when you combine them all. So for that, you might make an example of like a person who satisfies 2 out of 3, and then explain in the example why that's not enough because it just fails to have one of the conditions met. And that would pretty much be it. So justified true belief, what are the 3 conditions, explain what they mean, and then maybe give an example of why they are all needed and not necessarily sufficient without the others by reporting on combinations where there's like 2 out of 3. Okay, so that's good for that one. Thank you. And I would say this as we close. When you go through the list of questions, it's good, I think, to somehow bracket them in terms of topic and author, because that starts to break it down into more manageable chunks. When you just look at a big list with 80 items, it can seem like a lot of information. But when you start to group them by author and topic, so like create brackets and like you write author, this is the author for that one, or topic, and then that's an even broader way of breaking it down into manageable chunks. You'll start to see that a lot of questions overlap and that there's not actually a ton of topics. So I think that helps to organize your study just a little bit. Creating flashcards where you have sample responses for different questions that are on the study guide list is also a good plan. But anyway, that's just some general advice. We still have one more meeting on Thursday where we'll go over this study guide again and try to get more of the questions on the table. But for now then, I guess let's call it into this meeting because we're running out of time. So let me know that everything's good in the chat here. And thanks again for turning in your essays. As I say, I'll be grading them through the week, and they'll be ready with a grade by the end of the week. So then I can report to you your grades before the final. Yes, they will be graded before the final, and you'll be able to check for your grade or comments no later than the end of the week. Okay. Thanks, everybody, then, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, take care, and if you need anything, please email me, and I'll be in touch. Okay, bye-bye.